Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
I work at a grocery store and am constantly exposed to these weirdos wear nonsense outfits. Shirts that say shit like Disney Coffee Mom. The same pants with the same rips every time they're in the store. Ask where an item is that's right in front of them. Ask for a price on something that's very clearly got the price listed in front of them. Walk around the store for hours on end with something like a bunch of cilantro in their cart and nothing else, like hours on end. Ask where something is, and after explaining, they either go in the opposite direction and have to ask again, or they go right over to it and can't find it. Get unreasonably mad at employees when an item is sold out, even if it's a sale item and the store closes in 20. Randomly stopping in the way and staring blankly into nothing. Walking head-on into you while wheeling a stack of pallets across the store. Anyone else ever notice the public seemingly going on autopilot? Is it fluoride? Are our fellow civilians actually that stupid? It worries me that the same person who pushes a carriage into the only person or display in a flat area and spills everything also supposedly drove a 4-ton chunk of metal to get to the store.
Most people are not mindful of others at all. Either they are not capable of putting themselves in other people's shoes, or they choose not to on purpose. Not sure which option is more depressing. I work at a popular warehouse club. I find older people do not understand that you are there to do a certain task, like stocking or cleaning or ringing people up. They think you are there to answer their questions only, to serve them personally. I suspect they are not familiar with modern work expectations and having to accomplish tasks within a certain time frame. My job punishes me for not getting enough done and does not take into account that I deal with constant questions and interruptions while on the work floor. And I think younger people understand this, but boomers and older people do not know and do not care. They also do not care about the concept of personal space for people with a name tag on, and even Corona, and the cries for 6 feet of distance didn't fix this for normies. I hate that this job has made me less patient with people. Before I even had it, I tried to leave working people alone because I noticed that the constant interruptions and distractions were stressful for workers. I also understand that me being introverted and easily overwhelmed by external stimuli and crowds is my own problem, and not other people's responsibility. I recognize that I need to let little things go, like gossipy moms parking their carts in the middle of the aisle to chit-chat while blocking everyone else around them. But it happens so often that I find it frustratingly difficult to not feel resentment. I stay out of the way out of consideration for others but get snapped at when I ask for space to get by. I don't think there is a solution for this. I think this is just a tiny piece of the puzzle of what happens to society when there is no purpose and cohesion for the group. We weren't meant to live like this. Preemptive apology for blog posting.
This is an immensely relatable post, friend. No need to apologize, I feel you. The service industry is the fastest way to crush a person's soul due to exactly this shit. Entitled boomers who think they own you despite just being a customer and nothing more. Honestly, I have found that older people who are still working minor jobs are weirdly enough better about all this, I suppose because they have the experience to know what is and isn't frustrating in these sorts of jobs. Though it may also be the case that being considerate people in general hasn't afforded them any better jobs, which sadly doesn't seem like a far-fetched idea to me. But that's one of the few exceptions in my experience, that and some very disabled or extremely elderly people who require a bit of patience in general but are otherwise perfectly nice. A few years back I was working at a Subway restaurant, typical wagey stuff. There was this old boomer who came in wearing a suit one day who seemed like a nice enough fellow to me at first glance. I made his sandwich, got to the register to process his order, and he started reaching into his pockets and patting himself down a bit. He said something to the effect of, "I must have forgotten my wallet. My wife can come in later to pay if that's all right." Now, me being the kind sucker I am was about to take him at his word before I got a call from my boss. Apparently, the guy had been doing this multiple times in the past week or so with different employees. He'd do the same song and dance he did with me, get his food, and his wife would never show up. So, I was told to refuse his service. You wouldn't believe the glare that man gave me when I told him this. Sadly, the customer next to him took pity and paid for his shit, and he smugly sat in the restaurant and ate it. I try my best to remember the exceptions, because thinking about most people being like that guy kills me inside. We need to be better than this, as a species.
I worked with the public for many years. Nearly every day I would look around at the people and wonder how the country is still functioning, and what their places must look like inside. It must be that the people smart enough to keep things running were not where I was.
You think you're so smart, but people think the same thing about you.
Most people in public are just trying to get through the day. People probably perceive the same thing about you in public. It is just a thought that people do. People enjoy peace and quiet. And when they're in public looking for the thing that they need, they're mostly just thinking about getting their shit out and going home. You'd probably have a different opinion if you spent any time with people outside of the public view. But yes, public and private personalities in the average person are usually different. And it is incredibly weird, but that's only because when under so much scrutiny, everyone can be weird. So yeah, everyone is a dork, jackass, shithead, whatever. But it's interesting if you can make that connection with them. And it's fun.
You work in a fucking shop. What makes you think you're so special?
I don't really grasp the thought process behind this post. Do you have to be some kind of high-minded fellow with a degree in order to notice these kinds of things? Smoking a pipe and watching the world from the window? As OP interacts with the general public on an impersonal level, would this not allow for a more objective view on how they act? Are not almost all protagonists from the media regarding brainwashing and mind control John Everyman? How much more everyman could you get than a grocery store? I used to be a dishwasher and got my best thinking done in the dish tank. The closest to enlightenment I ever came was $10 an hour, pruned hands, free risotto and a cig and a beer in the back alley after we closed down.
I think a lot of this phenomenon is just intuitives not knowing how sensors think or work. Simple difference goes about like this. Intuitive people make connections between information that they are given. If they are introverted, they may even do a lot of thinking on that, making deeper and richer connections. Most people are extroverted sensing types. This means that they don't find connections between bits of information, they categorize information instead. Also, the majority being extroverted means that they think in a very task-oriented and material way. They don't care about the meaning behind things. They just care about the things themselves, as they are. This leads them to be less effective thinkers and feelers in general, but much more capable in physical reality. Organizing is easy. Everything is a straightforward path from A to B for them. No diversions, no C or D, etc. They feel way more shallow, way more simple. If you are a deep thinker, they seem like idiots. If you're a deep feeler, they seem emotionally numb or robotic. Truth is, at least as far as I'm aware, they're human. Their brains just categorize and store information a bit different than yours might.
These are the worst people to deal with in IT or customer service. They don't even want you to explain how their phone functions. They don't want to understand it themselves. They just know phone don't work, and it's your job to make phone work again. Then because they never learned anything the first time, you see them with the same problem next week. Where do I learn more about these personality types you've presented? I think most of us here fall into the former category.
Admittedly, my hypothesis is based on Myers-Briggs, which is admittedly not entirely reputable, so if you look into it, do take it with a healthy grain of salt. It's roughly based on Jungian theory, so that should give you an idea of how it works generally speaking. That said, it works well as a way to make more accurate generalized guesses about other people. If that sounds like your cup of tea, look up MBTI. You can figure out your own type and find communities to talk with other people about it.
Enneagram seems to be slightly more accurate than MBTI.
A lot of people use both, myself included. As for accuracy, MBTI is a fair bit more generalized, so I definitely see what you mean when you talk about accuracy. Though do keep in mind that the test is dubious, and you'll want to look into one of the better tests if you want to be typed a bit more accurately. That, and I also highly recommend looking into MBTI communities for any further help figuring that out, if you haven't, and/or you think your results aren't accurate. But yeah, generally speaking, MBTI is definitely not anything that should be taken as seriously as something like actual psychiatry. It can help in figuring oneself or other people out a bit better, but in no case should you be making any serious decisions only based on stereotypes or ideas promoted by MBTI.
This is what I think as well. My own research revealed that S-factor form is 85% correlated with no inner speech. Basically, it fits the description of an NPC. It also fits from another angle. Study finds that approximately 80% of people do not have an inner voice, and that is basically the amount of people with S-factor, based on a study of inner speech and the data from the tests. TL, DR, 80% of people are NPCs.
1. Half of all people are below 100 IQ by definition. You don't notice the smart people as much. You have attention bias and selection bias too. Most people get dumber as they age, and picking up new information becomes unnatural. It will happen to you. New product packaging isn't just taxing, it's actually mentally stressful as you age. 3. Yes, when you get old, you will say, people were smarter when I was younger. 4. Being on autopilot is actually a way to cope with the terror and pain of being alive past your youth. Being forced back into the present is a form of torture. This is related to 2. Any changes to the environment fucks up your autopilot and makes you glitch out at people till you can get back into autopilot. Just for the record, the study that said 80% of people have no inner speech had extremely flawed methodology and should be considered junk science. Read it yourself. Basically, they gave people an app that randomly pinged them during the day and asked them to answer a question about their thoughts. Well, of course, when prompted like that, 80% of people aren't going to answer with "my inner voice was talking." If anything, the ping would stop your inner voice most of the time before you read the question.
Seeing adults are weirder when you're kinda autistic. Be me, live alone, be drunk for weeks, neat, do what I want, go into the store at 8 in the morning. At 8, you are there serving me beers. Same guy every day. Fast forward to nighttime. Go out at night for a walk and listen to music, a lecture or podcast while I booze. Notice I'm the only human awake and you are all asleep to wake up and do the same thing tomorrow, like robots. Only my apartment lights are on. Meanwhile, I do weird shit I would never see any one of you do in public. I'm not even needed in society. I feel like I'm not doing enough in life, but in the end, I'm living in the moment and experiencing life. Maybe I'm a glitch since you all do the same thing.
I know that feel. I managed to become a journeyman electrician and I've never actually worked a 40-hour week in my entire life. 3 days in a week is pushing it for me. I have more money and more free time than all the other idiots spinning their tires.
Everyone has known TV is bad for you for 50 years. Rots your brain is the meme you have all heard. All TV, even PBS, especially Sesame Street and Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood because you are a child when you watch them. You can always tell TV watchers because they are over-dramatic, because they act like TV characters. Yes, your brain records an emotional response before your high-order intelligence kicks in. That is, before your frontal lobe thinks. What does this mean? That image is a little wrong. The context of what you see doesn't matter. What you see matters. Okay, what that means is if you see a good guy shoot a bad guy, you didn't see that. All you saw was a guy getting shot. That's what your simple brain remembers. Do you think it's normal to see a guy get shot 3, 4, 5 times a week? If you see a couple fight, then make up with a lesson learned. You remember the fight much more than the lesson. A fun thing to do. Get at an angle where you can see people's eyes watching TV, but you can't see the TV yourself. They almost never ever look normal anymore. They look like stoned and zoomed out zombies. It's downright creepy. Just look at them through a window for 10 minutes. It's a bizarre look. Half hour for ants are by far the worst. They never keep a shot long enough for real life. They go from a low emotional note to a high one to a low one within 5 minutes. It's not a normal way to experience emotion, and due to mirror neurons, you experiment with the emotion yourself.
TV replaced the hearth, the spiritual and social center of a household.
TV killed a lot of things that are now forgotten, such as musical families used to be much more common. where you would just spend your nights practicing instruments and singing. The data claims the average American spends 4 hours a day with TV. Granted, that's like a lot of background noise. But let's just say it's 1/4 that, just an hour a day. What would you do with an extra hour a day in 1915? One thing you would do is socialize more, get good at telling stories and jokes. TV is bad like pot is bad. Whatever is on TV is more exciting than your life at that moment, so TV makes you okay with doing nothing.
I wish I had one of those. I love songs so much I got yelled at and hit by my dad a lot because he hated all music, like all music. He had untreated autism and drank far too much when I was in my formative years. He was such a shitheel. I wish Django Fett was my dad. The way he was shown treating Boba in the comics and other media was how I always wanted to be treated.
Disney coffee, Mom. I don't know why, but this resonated with me. Some people, especially deracinated Americans, boil down their identity to a few things. For a lot of people, this comes down to their favorite band and music. For normies and the like, it is Marvel movies and Rick and Morty for the autistic Redditors. But then there are idiot people with minimal brain function. They liked Disney movies as a kid. They never really learned to like other kinds of film. They grew up and started drinking coffee. They also started having kids. That's their life, that's their entire identity. Someone who enjoys watching Disney movies and who likes drinking coffee.
Who cares if you're ostracized from that kind of society? I do feel like you can detect the propaganda in films, TV, and commercials easier when you're high. Maybe it's actually counterintuitive. Maybe the altered mindset makes the propaganda less effective as you internalize your thinking more.
Try watching primetime cable news when high. It's like they're scolding you. The reason they all talk with their hands so much is part of the NLP techniques. If someone is wagging a finger and yelling at you, you feel like you did something bad. When the news does the unnatural raised voice, hand waving while condemning something the Democrats think, or Republicans, you're being scolded into thinking that is bad from an authority figure. This might not be as effective for the people on this board, you bunch of rebellious contrarians, but think of how effective it is to the normies who follow authority figures. As far as trauma-based programming, the news will often play the same horrific scene on repeat as well. This is effective in generating a negative emotional response. Most of this programming is done to elicit an emotional response. Force yourself to question everything and think logically about it, and learn the techniques used in neuro-linguistic programming. Just search for it on YouTube for a ton of examples. You don't need to be high to notice these things. I just think it makes you feel uncomfortable watching this stuff, but you don't really know why.
Dude, I get cancer just walking by the TV when the news are on. It's peak clown world, all that carefully choreographed subliminal messaging. Sad to see my own family succumb to it. Now they try the same on the internet. Some days it seems like there is no sane person left. The audacity with which they do it pisses me off the most. Absolute evil. A false, artificially created reality we live in.
You won't be ostracized for saying you don't watch movies. What is he talking about? Maybe if you're 16, but if as an adult, literally, no one I know would react strangely if I said, I don't watch movies. I hardly ever do, actually. But there are a number of reasons. Work, different hobbies, grew out of it, kids take too much time, etc. That OP is 100% a schizo.
This is funny because I just got a job at a grocery store and it's kind of strange. I've never done it before, but I talked some shit and got to know some people. I usually am in my head while working because I'm just trying to get shit done. But at the end of the day, I'm a person. I helped out a few customers. Sometimes I didn't know how to help them because there is so much bullshit in the store that you have to compartmentalize in order to know the whereabouts of whatever it is. Afterwards, you just go right back to it. But you know, I see some people in the store and it's funny, really. The brief exchanges. It just feels weird because you're totally caught off guard in the middle of stocking a shelf for people to buy. This is true. You get to know people and people know who you are and it's kind of insane. It's some local yokel bullshit. I never worried about this because I grew up in the city.
In this thread, mildly autistic introverts that believe they are superior to everyone else because they browse Fortune. If you buy into the fluoride bullshit, you are as stupid as the Karens that never ask themselves what happens after death.
You know why it's easy to dismiss it? Because your generation transitioned into it. Gen Z and the like are poisoned from birth dealing with microplastics, hormones in the water, and fluoride. To say that this doesn't have some effect for the development of your frontal lobe and the pineal gland is ridiculous.
I am 34 years old, first of all, thank you. I have been on this board for years, and the entire fluoride thing is an easy explanation for people that are struggling with something, spiritual achievements for example, to pinpoint the finger at something, or an external factor that is somehow hindering them. The entire fluoride conspiracy is a dumb one. There are many true ones. Fluoride isn't one. But feel free to keep being a neurodivergent spurg that thinks that tap water is the only reason why he can't meditate for longer than 5 minutes, and that bottled water will fix it. I will agree that microplastics and hormones have definitely an impact on human health, but fluoride, no thanks.
I think it's mostly due in large part to the fact that people have completely lost touch with their communities. So many people walking around conditioned from birth to reject their own warrior spirit along with all of those on their ancestral plane of existence. There are no formal bonds. People have rejected Christianity, and this turned up a lot of shit in these communities because communities used to rely on the churches, especially when most American cities at one point were mostly rural with small populations. People can't be expected to adjust to these blasphemous changes. That would include rejecting everything you've ever known and embracing a new ideology for minimum fucking wage.
No, I totally understand what he's saying. And you do get ostracized in a way. My point is, it's not much to care about. All my customer-facing jobs, my fellow associates, would all talk about the same show, or quote a movie. Lots of, Anon, have you seen this movie? What? You've never seen this movie? Oh, Anon, you have to watch this. You don't get invited to watch the sports ball game at their house because you don't care about sports ball. This isn't a bad thing, because while you might enjoy beer and chips and some company, the main focus of everyone's attention will be on the screaming rectangle centered in the living room. The early stages of dating usually involve talking about your favorite movies and TV and other things that interest you. You won't grab their interest when you say you don't watch TV, and they're a big Disney fan. This too is okay because they're not the right person for you. It's better not to assimilate and just hold out for better friends.
Yeah, it seems to ultimately boil down to what you associate with. There is something about this thread that drew everyone here, a mutual understanding. To reach enlightenment, it is said you have to undergo an ego death. That way you can better understand nature for what it is. We are all animals. Every one of us an infinitesimal part of a whole, and that whole being an infinitesimal part of a greater whole. It should be expected that in this journey, you will run into beings on a lesser plane of existence.
There's a difference between acting dumb and being dumb. I have had, as I'm sure all of us have, moments where we zone out and forget how to use the credit card machine. Usually this is immediately after work, and I'm still adjusting to non-work mode. This is excusable, because we all do dumb stuff all the time. What's not excusable is the people that are dumb. The people who continuously need coaching through the checkout process, the people who repeatedly need another adult to tell them where everything is in the store, because they are incapable or unwilling to look themselves. The people whose whole personality boils down to the slogan on their t-shirt. The people who only consume, never create, except a burden for the rest of society. While the OP gave us only brief descriptors, I can assure you that working retail, you can tell the difference between someone having a lapse of reason and people who live their whole lives without that reasoning.
A big issue is there seems to be something against acknowledging others. I have some confidence issues because people are so confident that my skills and ideas often go unacknowledged or ignored. It gets confusing when others turn out to be wrong because I trusted them to be correct. They don't admit that I could have been right. You should have spoken up. I'm not always right. but I do communicate frequently, and am often ignored. Life is hard, but only because I was raised to be a third-place mope. I think there's an issue where most people can't accept failure. It's hard to do.
How can you distinguish real people from philosophical zombies?
There are several tests. 1. Use analogies to communicate. Real people can comprehend and appreciate original analogies and metaphors, but NPCs will take them literally. Metaphor, simile, synecdoche, metonymy are all lost to them. Everything you say will be taken literally unless you resort to well-worn cliches like kick the bucket, jump the gun. 2. Ask them a hypothetical question like, how would you feel right now if you skipped breakfast? Or, what would you do if you had billions of dollars? Or what if Tesla was an alien? Real people will have no trouble answering questions like this, but NPCs are likely to just look at you blankly or respond that they didn't skip breakfast. They aren't billionaires, and Tesla wasn't an alien. They have no imagination and cannot entertain hypothetical scenarios or pursue alternative chains of logic or causation. 3. They will lie for no reason. This seems to contradict the above observation, and yet I've found it to be true. NPCs will often say things that are patently, self-evidently false for no discernible reason and cling to their falsehood, regardless of any evidence or proof to the contrary. I'm not talking about religious dogma or schizo-conspiracy theories, but just mundane facts like, it's a Tuesday, or who is president. 4. NPCs don't express emotions convincingly. They will alternate between wooden indifference and theatrical over-the-top melodrama. They come off as poor actors because, since they don't have any real emotions themselves, the best they can do is mimic the expression of emotion they observe in real people. But they can never get it right because there is nothing genuine behind the act. Hope this helps.
That just sounds like autism.
No, it's nothing like autism, and I knew someone was going to say that.
It's definitely a bit like autism. All of your criteria are based on them not wanting to intellectually engage the same kind of discussion or behavior as people you consider real. What does being an NPC mean, and how do you prove that your tests accurately determine it? Does being an NPC merely mean being of lower intelligence or self-awareness than average? If so, then your test would be valid, I suppose. If you mean to imply that NPCs genuinely have no soul, or feel no emotions, then you have no way to prove your test works. An actual philosophical zombie could easily pass all of your tests while still being soulless and unfeeling, merely by having a sophisticated level of simulation, and conversely, an unintelligent, awkward person with genuine feelings and a soul could fail all your tests due to awkwardness and an inability to intellectually engage in such discourse.
Autists have a tendency to take social BS and verbal generalizations at face value, but that's nothing like not being able to comprehend simple analogies. I have an autist friend who creates novel analogies all the time. He's better at it than any normie I've ever known. Also, autists obviously have no trouble with hypotheticals. Anyone who thinks otherwise has never met an autistic and probably hasn't even read a book on the condition. Autists also have emotions. They just invest them in stuff that actually matters rather than collective delusions like politics and religion. In my experience, they are actually more emotionally authentic than most normies who are faking it at least half of time anyways. Finally, though autists can and do lie, they are generally less likely to lie than normies. They certainly wouldn't engage as the gaslighting level deception that I described in my previous post. And yes, by NPC I mean a soulless automata with no inner experience, no qualia. They are basically what Descartes imagined all the lower animals to be. How do I know? Well, of course I can't know directly since I have no immediate access to their lack of consciousness. However, I think my hypothesis is consistent with what I can observe from the behavior of these simulacrums who LARP at being human. After all, they display all hallmarks of any primitive AI. They can't understand analogies unless they are cliches. They constantly confabulate nonsense seemingly out of thin air. That's called a hallucination in AI research. They're glib and superficial and can't think hypothetically because, not possessing any consciousness, they also lack imagination. I could be wrong, but until someone comes up with a more plausible explanation, this is the theory I'm working from.
While this is a plausible explanation, I don't think all the normals are this deep. From my experience, the true automata are the pathological narcissists. They've fully invested in the lie, and in the process they have lost all access to themselves. I've seen these people literally glitch out and twitch when confronted very directly. They are running on a script. They can't stop lying. They can't stop confabulating. They can't be persuaded. They act like insects. 1. The problem of evil. Based on my own life, which is the most real thing that I can draw conclusions from, I can see that the universe isn't completely evil. But if I am to believe that all the people in the world are real, then that quickly changes. It changes the universe from a mediocre parent to a completely evil one. Because I yet have no evidence in my own life that the universe is as evil as it would be if news were real and history books were real, then I can conclude that the people suffering these atrocities are not real, and it's all some kind of cruel joke that genuinely deceived my younger self. 2. People's abilities. Video games, films, music, books, cities, even a pair of scissors, all of these things are supposedly achieved by people like myself. Now that I'm 22, I have an idea of what I can do, of what my limits are, and I could never achieve the things people do on a day-to-day basis. This makes it hard to believe that conscious souls are riding around inside of those amazing performers. If people have some of my attributes, consciousness, but not others, uselessness, then that would be unnecessarily strange. Why would I stand out so much in that negative way? It makes more sense to think that people really are completely different from me, and the reason they achieve so much is because it's actually the simulation doing it. 3. Direct perception. I have directly perceived social media accounts as completely fake, as belonging to no one. This felt like a period of enlightenment. I also perceived people at the mall or at the gym as completely fake, as if they were all just actors in a simulation with no independent reality. The perception felt very real, like having attained a new insight. I won't easily discount my direct experience.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel, as more Greentext will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.